Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I would like to ask each and every one of you that if you enjoyed these shows, please hit like, share, and subscribe after you view the show. Thank you very much.
Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I'm your senior host, and my co-host, Pete Turner, is floating around the background somewhere. He's currently on the road, so he's got bad signaling, so he may not have made it. But if you're there, Pete, wave to the audience. I don't think we're going to get him. Oh, there he is. Hey, Pete. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Jason Puck, and Jason has a very interesting story to share with you. He spent some time in the Middle East. He was over there during some of the more prolific regimes that were running those parts of the world at that time. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you about it. I really want Jason to open up with that. So at this time, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you because I'm dying to hear the story, the journey, if you will, because it's pretty fascinating what Pete shared with me. So introduce yourself to the audience and let's get started.
Sure. Pleasure to be with you. I host my own podcast called The Disorder Podcast. But
interesting.
The short version of, I guess, life history is I grew up in New York and New Jersey. I was studying science and I thought I would be a doctor. And in my senior year of my undergrad, the 9/11 happened. And being from Manhattan, I took that quite seriously and I thought I should do something to help my country. I moved to Lebanon in 2002 when I graduated university, and I got a Fulbright. I was in Iraq at the start of the invasion.
Wow.
I lived in Syria on my Fulbright for 2 years, and then I did graduate work in the UK at Oxford, where I was recruited by a consulting firm to represent them in Libya. And I was in Libya in the later years of the Qaddafi regime, where I was trying to help Western businesses understand the commercial environment there. And that was really a very seminal moment in my life. And since that point in 2008, I mostly do Libya. After 2011, I made my own consulting firm that helps Western businesses in shipping, in oil and gas, and construction operate in Libya. And I advise Western governments about counterterrorism, about stakeholders and other matters in Libya. And before getting into the story of my work in DC, we can just say I've branched out from Libya. I have a podcast which is about a range of topics from climate change to Ukraine and the Middle East. And that derives from my second book and my concept of the global enduring disorder.
What are the books about specifically, Jason?
Sure. So the two doctorates that I didn't complete at Oxford and Cambridge are about Libyan history. And both of my books are about contemporary Libyan history. The first one, the 2011 Libyan uprisings and the struggle for the post-Qaddafi future, is a treatment of the Arab Spring in Libya. What were its causes? How can we think of there being different uprisings, an uprising of Islamists, an uprising of civil society activists, an uprising in Misrata, an uprising in Zintan? And it's an academic treatment of different aspects of the 2011 Libyan uprisings. The more popular book, Libya and the Global Enduring Disorder, derives from my experiences in DC, where I ran something called the U.S. Libya Business Association, which is a K Street trade association. My joke is I represented a lot of small companies that no one has ever heard of: Pepsi, ConocoPhillips, Motorola. And being in the beast with this appointee level position, I kind of experienced a new era of geopolitics, which I call the enduring disorder. And when I resigned that job and sought UK citizenship, I had a sense that the Trump one term entirely transformed not just America, but the globe, and that I would want to prepare for that. So that book uses Libya, as well as Syria and Ukraine, as microcosms to understand this new era of geopolitics that we are in, which I term the enduring disorder.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I'm really with you with a lot of that. The first Trump term woke me up, totally woke me up to what the inevitability process of our nations globalized would ultimately become if that pattern of political agenda, if you will, were able to come back and systematically start doing exactly what we're watching today. So I really have my hats off to you on that, sir. The other thing, when you were over in Libya in that territory at that time, that there was a lot of activity, so to speak, the Qaddafi regime and all of that. Were you operational for the Department of Justice at that time, the government, or were you?
No, I won't work for the U.S. government, so no, I've never had any work for the U.S. government.
I can respect that. As you know, I spent 17 years undercover, recruited out of a federal prison because I used to be involved with the Sinaloa drug cartel. I spent years as a smuggler, and later I set up the trafficking in the Pacific Northwest region. I was a primary target of Operation Northern Exposure. But most importantly was the 17 years when I was drafted out of prison and agreed to do that work. The amazing relationships and my 14 books that I've written, 11 of those books are accredited to special forces teams, various agencies that I work with, CIA, DEA, IRS, Customs, on and on and on, in foreign countries and being operational. I was kidnapped once on a mission. I was captured in Central America and tortured daily with the men that I was captured with. And, you know, there's so many things that life generates as a result of what we can survive. Now, you were in hot zones, basically like I was just describing there. And you had to survive that, whether you felt threatened or intimidated or not. You never know what's going to come into play. And
of course. And I think that those kind of experiences, I've been kidnapped twice as well.
But then you know exactly what that feels like.
You need a kind of resilience and to not freak out. You know,
yeah, and to not divulge anything. You know, when I was in the Army, 1971 to 74, I was in a place called Tigerland. We were just during the Vietnam War, and we were being trained to go overseas. And we had a prisoner of war camp training. And I remember paying attention to that cycle. And here, decades later, I get grabbed and kidnapped. The first time I was kidnapped, the thoughts come back. But when I got captured in another foreign country, every day we thought we were going to get executed. I mean, we were horribly physically beaten and treated. And the expectation of death actually became a relief to look forward to, if that makes sense to you. It probably does. You've been kidnapped. But
I haven't had the exact experience, fortunately. I admire your strength. I think that in my case, I just learned to have a kind of cognitive dissonance, which is that I can express my identity or my politics in one way in one environment, and I can express it and empathize with people in another way in another environment. And I remember a lovely conversation you had with your co-host, Pete, about, you know, how he identified with the people that he needed to work with in Afghanistan and could empathize with them. Yes. I'm able to empathize with people that I completely disagree with. I've had friends who are jihadis, and I've had friends who are Israeli settlers. Yes. And I've had friends who, you know, are neocons in the Defense Department, and others who are, you know, lefties protesting against the government. So I feel that that's a strength that I've learned. And when I hear your story, I'm proud that I've always had, you know, a range of contacts from right-wing Republicans to left-wing Democrats to, you know, the range of opinion in the Middle East and Europe. And I think that that's really important. And I worry about our country as well as a world where people are no longer able to listen to each other and to really empathize with each other.
Boy, I just love that about you. And this is exactly why I wanted you on my show today. I am a left-wing Democrat, have been for 47 years, voting years. And I feel very, very emotional, if you will, about what I see other people going through. And I don't care if we are on different sides and we disagree on everything. I will agree to disagree with you on everything. I don't like the anger energy that I'm seeing in my country. And I do love the support that I see from so many other nations to our current situation in this country. And it kind of goes along with what you just said, with how we fit in each of these extreme environments in the moment that we find ourselves confronted with that specific environment. And I'm identical to you in that regard. You know, Jesus Christ taught me and told me when I became formally ordained, graduated seminary, started on my doctoral studies, He said, I only gave you 2 commandments, Pastor Hal. One of them is to love God the Father above all things, but the other one is to love each other. And brother, you heard about me being assassinated, left for dead, and I was in a coma for a couple of days. And when I came out of the coma, the very first thing I felt was a love for the very man that was sent to kill me. And to me, that was a confirmation of the reality, if you will, of God's deityism and my acceptance of his deityism, if you will, because I truly do carry love for every single person. Even the enemies I've had in my life, I don't carry none of that. I don't allow that to fester within myself, within my soul, because this time is too short. I'm in my 70s. It just seems like the other day I was in my 30s and 40s. But brother, it's going by fast. And how do you want to survive those days? How do you want to go through it?
And I think you raised a really interesting point. I was in Uzbekistan last week at a conference there, and there were many Iranians and many Russians at this conference.
Interesting.
And a fascinating difference is the social demeanor of the Iranians. You say you're American, you're from New York. I mean, I didn't want to get into that I live in London and that I'm also, a British national, but
yes, that's wonderful.
Warmth and understanding, and they might disagree about some things, but literally, even though my country is bombing their country while we're, hanging out.
Yes.
Because it's a culture that has an emphasis on tradition, religion, the family, all of that.
Yes.
And I don't want to be prejudiced, but the Russians, not only at that conference, but whenever I interact with Russians who mostly don't leave Russia, so rude and direct and condescending and superior.
Yes.
They grow up in an atheist, might is right. I have this over you. Now we're in a Russian speaking environment here in Uzbekistan, and you can't even speak to the cab driver. And I find it fascinating. I'm not a person of specific religious faith, but I have respect for it. And to contrast the more atheistic Putin, Russian, might makes right post-Soviet worldview from an Iranian guy from some village who's had to escape, and the kind of empathy that he will treat you when you say, I'm American, I'm from New York.
Yes.
I think that's really fascinating and gets at what you're talking about in terms of how we need to make the time and the space to listen to each other and empathize with each other.
Absolutely, brother. And I'll tell you something. I have had some business with the Russian mafia, and it was about 30 years ago. And I mean, these guys, I was moving millions of dollars per transaction dealing with them. And I got to tell you, I've dealt with a lot of dangerous people, but there is an underlying current within their mindset that really lets you know that at any instant, it could be very hostile and very damaging, and you're not going to survive this thing. And I'm talking about sitting in a dang restaurant, negotiating what we're doing out the backside of that restaurant right now while you and I are talking at a table, meaning Russian mafia. They're pretty critical. And when I was young, back in the early 1970s, when I ETS'd out of the Army, I was in Mexico at the village that I lived in as a child. And I remember going over to Jalisco and hooking up with a guy called Rafael Cara Quintero. And he became the largest marijuana man in the whole country of Mexico. But he introduced me to a guy named El Chapo. And I have a picture that I carry of me and Chapo that goes back 40 some odd years now. And I remember we were just marijuana guys that were smuggling marijuana across the border into the United States. No big deal. And then cocaine came into the picture, and our world turned from peace, love, and handshakes to automatic weapons and examples being made in front of us every single time we were down there, it seemed like. And that's why I have the mindset of humanity so deeply ingrained in me, because of all of the violence and unnecessary deaths that I've witnessed. And when you were talking to me earlier before the show about your being in the Qaddafi regime era at that time, under the Qaddafi regime in that region, I couldn't help but think of some of the tragedies that you might have been exposed to. So you have an understanding, like many of us who have survived those type of environments acquire. And your heart today, I can feel it. You have true compassion. You are an empathetic person. And I'm really, my hat's off to you on that, because that's what we hope to become when we have gone through extremes of the opposite. So good for you, brother. I'm so
Thank
proud of you
And
for that.
I think that a thing that we share is book learning only goes so far.
Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
interested in Shia theology. I care about medieval Islam. That can only tell you so much about how a guy's going to behave or how the Iranian regime this or that. Having lived and met people and interacted with them,
Yes.
so much of any social science, and this is probably true about hard sciences, but any social science is understanding people. How will he behave if I'm rude in this way? How will he behave if I remembered his wife's name and I ask, how is her health? And,
Yes.
pleasantries
Yes.
in that culture are just so important.
And you mean it. You mean it. And they see that. Yeah, it's not just words, brother. And you're right. Literary manuscript only teaches so much. The actual experience of life in a different culture, it tends to ratify the intent and purpose of why we went and studied in the first place. Because now we have a basic comfort place, if you will, when we have an understanding of the concept of another civilization. Yet once we are exposed to it, then we transition more to it in a comfortable way because of the literary backgrounds that we had manifested prior to that experience. Does that make sense?
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
We're humans, and therefore the human element. And I think this also connects to faith. Faith is about certain human needs.
Yeah, I agree. This journey, this short time that we have to do this journey, I think, Jason, that in my 71, almost 72 years of life now, I look back and I reflect on all of the monetary things I had owned when I was rich from being a smuggler and trafficker. And then I look at the birth of my children, the death of my wife. I look at so many different things that have transformed me into this person of recognizing the most valuable thing in life, and that is love for one another. And I truly have found that ecstasy, that place with them. When I came up out of that coma and I thought about that guy that had a piece of paper in his hand with a name and an address written on it, I remember when I was that guy. And I remembered that I didn't have love and compassion. I didn't care. I was involved in being trained in a very, very dangerous environment. And I was radicalized as a result of that. But the moment that I found my greatest peace in my life was the moment that I truly believed and accepted that faith. But had I not had all of those extreme other circumstances in my life, I wonder if the depth of my faith would be where it is today. Would I have struggled 12 years to get my doctorate? Would I have done those things? And the answer is no, I would not have. It took coming through the bad parts of my life and the horrible things that I did and survived and witnessed to be able to have the depth, that same depth, only in passion and compassion for all people. And I've been ordained 29 years this year. My first ordination. My second formal ordination came February 3rd of 1999 under a bishop in Seattle. And 3 years after that, I was installed as a senior pastor at my own church, and I was being trained to become a bishop. But at that same time, Jason, and you can probably relate to this because you've moved in danger zones, I'm sitting there and I'm preparing. On Wednesday night was my night that I would prepare my sermon for my Sunday church, my people, my followers. And the phone would ring and they say, pack a bag, you're on your way to Bogota tomorrow morning, And this is my life for almost 4 years. One day I'd be studying or preaching. The next thing I'm getting a call and I'm packing a bag to go undercover to go after high-level targets in a foreign country. And I had to go to the bishop and I had to say, sir, I'm requesting sabbatical because I believed at that time that I needed to pay back the world for the sins that I had been a part of in my younger years. And it was so strong. And he was such a wise bishop. And he saw that passion to go live and face danger every day of my life, rather than carry and just say the words that I'm sorry for what I did. I think that we need to show by example. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I mean, I want to resonate with a few things that you've mentioned there. Not only as Americans, but, as people who grew up in a relative degree of comfort, yes. We are lucky and fortunate. And if you're healthy and, you're able to be listening to this podcast, the world hasn't done you so wrong. And the concept of giving back, whether it's through faith, that you had a sense that you should make right, that you should make amends.
Exactly.
Or in my case, I understood that having gone to an elite liberal arts college and gotten into prestigious graduate schools, I could work on Wall Street and make a decent living. But I didn't see what the virtue of that was. It's true, you could then give money to charity, or you could use your position for a whole range of good works, but I didn't per se see that. I felt I have to do something. We had this 9/11. We have some of the failures in the Iraq War. Maybe I can help the West and America and Britain make better policy towards the Middle East. Maybe I can try to fight corruption in Libya. I mean, a lot of what my consulting work does is point out broken aspects of the Libyan economy to try to advise Western policymakers. I have become disillusioned because so little of the policy advice and the op-eds and the scholarly papers and the BBC appearances actually do anything.
Yes,
and I think that this is a depressing moment. Like, so I don't know if this is airing today, but we are speaking on the 8th of April.
Yes.
And I woke up this morning in the UK, so I didn't know that there would be the ceasefire when I went to bed because it was announced, when I was asleep.
Yeah, the same as me. I didn't know it even over here.
I would like to be grateful, optimistic. Oh, the war is over. Whatever I think about its congressional illegality, whatever I think about the moronic nature of this and that, oh, this could be better now. And I just can't get there because I've sadly become so cynical. I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold. I think that either the conflict in Lebanon will spiral back into the Gulf and into Iran, that there's corruption at the core of Trumpian decision-making, that they are, shorting Brent one day and going long on Brent crude the next day, and that they're achieving certain objectives for them and not the country. And I so want to be in a position where I can be believing in helping others, and that the scholarly output, the consulting output, the media output is in some ways edifying and helping. I mean, it's just something that I very much want.
I look at them as being culpable, the media resources and the media outlets. There are so many things right now that are needing to be openly aired and discussed that are being shoved under the carpet, so to speak. And I have great concerns about that. And people globally now are less apt to believe what they're hearing or seeing from our media resources, because so much of it is bought and paid for by billionaires that are allegedly involved in the Epstein files and these other horror stories that we're having to survive and go through. And, brother, when I was a drug smuggler back in those years, I remember being in a ranch outside of Culiacan, Sinaloa. And I was up in a ranch house. I went into the house. Our vehicles were being packed with marijuana at the time. And I looked down this corridor and I saw the faces of these young children. And you could just see fear and disillusionment and confusion. And I could hear them mumbling to each other. And the mumbling they were doing was chaotic. It was, again, fearful. And, to this day, Jason, I regret that there was nothing I could do, because those children were being trafficked to the United States. I did find that out and confirm it later. Okay. And it has carried with me my entire life. So watching the unveiling of the Epstein files and everything I've researched, I've gone into the court records. I've watched FBI that have deemed credible witness testimonies. And why are people trying to disavow that? Why are they saying this is not evidence? Why are they saying it's not proof? I'm a former state licensed investigator for the state that I live in here in the United States. And I've seen people taken down with far less evidence than I'm looking at in the courts. But we know. Can I jump in? Please, of course.
Until 2 or 3 years ago, I would say I'm against silly conspiracy theories, and I'm a centrist, and I believe in a mediated media, whether it's mainstream or not, and I want to trust experts. But the reality is, if you study this stuff, you can't help but concluding there has been a cover-up
Absolutely.
Epstein's activities. This cover-up is more than 20 years old.
Yes.
It goes back to when Vicky Ward, a British journalist, had her piece spiked at Vanity Fair and had the allegations of rape taken out of them. There have been, the sweetheart deal that he got down in Palm Beach, and his ability to be on like work study while he was arrested. He was molesting women while he was in jail, while he was enriching himself because he got such a sweetheart deal. And why Alex Acosta, why others did what they did. I don't care how sane, balanced, centrist, anti-conspiratorial you are. There was a conspiracy and a cover-up.
Still is.
Now just try to understand what were the reasons. And obviously some of them have to do with tax evasion. Others have to do with having powerful friends. Others of them have to do with connection to intelligence agencies. And I think that this is, in some ways, the biggest story of our time. I'm writing right now about Epstein, because even if the Epstein story itself may not, say, be as important as how Putin's oligarchs and the Russian mafia have robbed the Russian people blind and taken $1 trillion or more of their dollars, hid them in Western Europe, killed millions. The Epstein story is a microcosm of how forces like the rise of Putin under the nose of the West. We had the post-Soviet world under our thumb from the Budapest Memorandum onward. They were economically weak. They needed Western technology to exploit their oil and gas. How was it possible that such a criminal enterprise could come into being? And I feel that the reason why the Epstein story is so big is that if you come to grips with its meaning, it can tell you about why AI can't be regulated, why climate change is both being denied and lobbied against, and we can't coordinate one European country with another European country.
Yeah.
The Epstein story has so many of the lessons of what I would call our era of global enduring disorder baked into it.
Well, you know what, brother? We should definitely, you and I last year, I spent over half of last year deeply digging into the Epstein files and the story and going into the evidentiary resources that I deemed were credible and valid. And you sound like the person that I should actually have on, maybe come on your show and we have a frank discussion about this, because I've seen the other side of that world too. I have seen the faces of trafficked children. I have been involved with incredibly powerful and wealthy people that were able to buy themselves out of any scenario, any government, anything. I watched the formation of the Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco cartel. I watched the Gulf Coast cartel. I watched them all develop and form in the later 1970s, and then as they become strongholds in the 80s. I met Angel Gallardo, the godfather of all the godfathers in Mexico. I knew those people. I came up at that precise time. And then how Colombia, by way through the CIA, came and taught us the art of torturing, the art of, it used to be when we first switched into coke, I remember seeing people put on their knees and have a bullet put in their head, and that was it. That's not how it transformed into a later state, because of other influence from other countries that taught them how to torture. And the same thing applies with the Epstein files that we're talking about right now. This has been going on a lot longer than Epstein was born. This has been going on with the hierarchy of many countries for centuries. But I think that now we're at a point, Jason, where it is getting exposed, and they can only deny it for so long. And I get beat up every single day on my Facebook accounts and others because I defend the victims. I believe in the victims. I stand with the evidence that I found. And people say, well, show me proof, show me proof. And brother, I'm showing them proof.
But there's so much proof.
And they deny it.
But anyone who doesn't accept the proof is literally burying their heads in the sand. And I want to make a slight nuance to what you've said.
Please.
Yes, criminal networks and hierarchy and patriarchy and money buying immunity have been going on since before writing.
Oh, yeah.
But Epstein is a little bit different because the internet, neoliberalism, and globalization allowed accumulation not only of amounts of capital, but global networks that I think are different than what had happened previously.
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree with that. And blackmailing. Epstein created those millions of files like that, all for the purpose of extracting and placing people into very dangerous situations should they become exposed.
And I don't even think we have half the files.
We
Probably
don't.
the majority
yet.
of them, but the majority of them are not the released ones that the FBI has, the DOJ,
Absolutely.
but they're in New Mexico somewhere, or he's buried them, or the most sensitive things that one could be used to say blackmail. I don't know, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Do you think that he shared them just over email? Of course not.
Of course not, brother. But you know what? I do think that some of these people, as it surfaces, may eventually flip and give us a lot more intelligence gathering resources than we're finding ourselves with today. And like I said, Jason, I'd love to come on your show and have a discussion on nothing but the Epstein.
I would love that.
Saga. Yeah, because I have really put a lot of work into it. And we're there. But anyway, we're getting close on time here. And God, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed you today, Jason. I really have. I get a sense of a kinship with you because I can tell in your conversations that you've been able to not be afflicted too deeply by some of the things that you have seen and you've experienced. And I mean, you're just hitting the top of the iceberg with regard to.
I think another thing that I resonated when I heard you before coming on is the modesty and empathy that comes from having suffered. It could go two ways. Yeah. I know some people for whom having gone through a personal trauma either makes them arrogant or closed off or unable to deal, a kind of very post-PTSD thing. And I think in my case, I had a little bit of that after a particular trauma in Syria for a while, and I was very, very paranoid.
Yes.
And I've come out the other side. And in a way, this might be something that we share as a kind of inner calm. I'm never going to have it the way that a man of faith is able to. But yeah, I think that we need to bring that courage to looking at Epstein because we probably have insights about the depravity of human nature. Why is it that someone could be willing to do so much harm to so many others?
Yeah. It's amazing and have no passion whatsoever. Now, I have known very dangerous men. I have seen men that were black in their souls. But, you know, I look at what they did to these children and to rebirth the children from these children and what happened to those babies and the depth and depravity of such deep and unholy sin. And it's like we're allowing it to go on because people are denying the evidence that we have produced. And I post it. I'm on 4 different media sites. I post my stuff out there daily, and the hatred that comes back towards me. I mean, I've had threats, and I've had people that just absolutely.
And who are they defending? I want to understand this. Someone who attacks you for what is their goal?
The primary has been Donald Trump, the president of the United States. They really believe in him. They worship him. They praise him. He is a 10 God to so many of them. And then I also know a lot of Republicans. My family has a lot of them that are really decent, downright people. And they don't judge me for what I put out every day because I'm doing what God's telling me to do, not what they're telling me to do. But you know what? They're also, it's kind of like they're in denial, but not, I don't know how to really put that into a formation that makes sense. But they have less effect by Trump and his administration because they're focusing more on other things in life. And my family, my siblings and all are successful people. They've built their lives from the ground up, and all of them. And as a result of that, I kind of like that I see where they're going with all of that. But on the other hand, you can't put your head in the sand. This is dangerous.
I know that we need to run. I will expand on one idea here.
Please.
The Epstein story challenges someone for whom status quo power structures and hierarchies seem to be doing well.
I agree with you.
If you picked yourself up and, you know, you got the promotion at the law firm, or, hey, this girl accepted my proposal and we have these kids, and I just don't want to be bothered by it. And I don't want to hear that Scott Bessent or Howard Lutnick either met Epstein, went to the island, or that they put in their trades before they did the bombing, and then they're, betting on Brent to go down before he announces the ceasefire. No, we won the war. I don't want to hear it, because cognitively, if you're doing well, knowing these details or truths undercuts your relationship to status quo power structures. And that's very problematic, because people should be willing to inform themselves.
I agree with you, but they're not. And I think a lot of that, too, that we're not touching on too much is the purpose or the reason of the lack of acceptance. Some people simply can't deal with it. And that's the bottom line. I've seen that in my audiences where people will respond back on the Epstein saga. But anyway, we do have to break off, Jason. And I want to tell you that I would love to come on your show and share this. So if you ever want me to, I'm letting you know now I'm available for you.
Awesome.
I love meeting you.
Very Iran booked for now, but let's say in May that we will definitely have time for this sit down. And
absolutely,
I'm inspired by your story, and I look forward to working together more. Please check out my Disorder podcast.
I will. God bless you, brother. Be well.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors.